Since I think I've set a pretty decent standard for myself when it comes to my Gundam 1 Year War videos, I'm taking a little bit more time to do some proper research about the next phase of the timeline in that war before we do the next video. I just want everyone to know that it's still on the way, but today we're going to talk about some stuff that is screwed up. As I've mentioned before, I got into anime during the late 90s, early 2000s, around that era, when Toonami was first created. When we started entering that era of anime that I honestly hate the most, which is, when Naruto and Bleach basically took over and became the most popular franchises around the late 2000s, what I ended up doing around that time was searching for something that scratched a more mature and admittedly more edgy itch. For the last couple of vids that we've done on this particular topic when it comes to disturbing anime, we've gone over Angel Cop, and we've gone over Cyber, both of which are known for their ridiculous amounts of gore, terrible voice acting, and surprisingly good animation. Today, however, we're going to talk about an anime that gets very screwed up, but is also really, really stinking good. Today, we're going to talk about the Guyver. Now, one thing I'm going to warn everyone about is that I'm actually not going to be talking about some very specific things when it comes to Guyver. I'm not going to be talking about the movies. I know, boo away, yada yada yada. And I'm also not going to be talking about the manga. I've only started actually reading the manga after watching the anime, and I'm going to save that for a separate review. Now you might be wondering, well, why not just do both right now? Do a crazy long form video. No. The series is called Disturbing Anime, not Disturbing Manga. If I were to do a video on Berserk, I wouldn't talk about the manga at all, as much as I love it. I mean, it's my favorite ever, but I would just talk about the 90s anime. If I did one on Devilman's OVAs, which we are going to do at some point, I won't be talking about the manga there either, unless I'm just talking about how accurate it is. Not to mention, I'm of the opinion that some manga that exist out there that have had animes but didn't get to finish the story in animated form, honestly kind of deserve their own videos separate from the animation, just because it gives me more time to dive into what makes the manga so good. So, something to consider. Not to mention, gives you guys more material to watch in the future. It's a win-win situation. Alright, let's get on to the topic. What is Guyver? Well, the full title is Bioboosted Armor Guyver, and it was created by mangaka Yokishi Takawa, who oddly enough got his start in porn. Yeah, he started out as a hentai artist. I'm not going to go too deep into that because I am not a coomer, nor do I desire to attract the attention of any coomers. Go look it up on your own time. Anyway, if I could describe Guyver as a show in one sentence, it would be if you took Kamen Rider and decided to make it metal as fuck. That's basically the long and short of it. Despite the fact that this is a much more mature story than what most tokusatsu was delving into around the time that it was originally published, 80s, 90s-ish timeline, it really does come across as a love letter to things like Kamen Rider, or things of that nature. It starts out as a Monster of the Week show that usually features our titular hero fighting something rather ugly, learning how that ugly thing works, and then kicking its ass. Then, a monster comes along and kills our hero. Yep. The Guyver gets fucking melted, as in limbs just taken clean off, and then the rest of him gets melted. It's a pretty grim sight. Then he manages to resurrect himself faster than Kira Yamato did in Gundam Seed, though in this particular case you don't have to read a completely unrelated manga story to explain why it happened, because the writing in Gundam Seed is really, really bad. Yes, I still hate Gundam Seed. No, I'm not stopping. Anyway, with that particular development, you can kind of see why I actually got interested in this particular series. And it's not really a spoiler either, because what I just described happens very, very early on in the story. I actually got introduced to Guyver not through my local video store, though I did see the VHS for the original OVAs in there. I never got around to renting them. But what got it back on my radar at a different point in time was in the early 2010s, I got recommended a video randomly of the fight between Guyver and the first enzyme, which was, well, you're seeing it in front of you. It's fucking brutal. And I couldn't help but say to myself, I need to watch this at some point. So, the series got put on my watch list, up until very recently when I finally got in the mood to sit down and watch the whole damn thing. So there's actually 2 anime that this particular manga series got, and unfortunately both of them end up ending really abruptly and come across like they are basically there to be a gateway drug for the manga, and, you know, I feel like I'm waffling. Sure, dude, am I waffling too much?
Waffles, tasty waffles with lots of syrup.
Okay, that answers that question. Let's go ahead and just start in on a plot breakdown. The story primarily follows students Sho Fukumachi and his friend Tetsuro Sagawa. The 2 boys are hanging out in the woods when a disc-shaped object lands near them after an explosion that went off nearby. As the 2 young men decide what to do with the thing, it latches onto Sho and reveals itself to be a suit of bio armor called a Guyver. The explosion that sent it their way was caused by a creature called a zoonoid. It had escaped an evil corporation that turned the gentleman into a monster, and the explosion was his last bit of desperation before he was murdered by fellow monsters. The plot from here largely radiates around the Guyver armor and its significance to the overall plot, though as time goes on, more and more background of grand conspiracies and whatnot that you expect from biopunk like this start to come into effect. Anyway, the Kronos Corporation, our big bad of the show, want the Guyver for reasons that I'll go over later, and they also fear it because they understand that it is extremely powerful, and they actually have to bioengineer some stupidly powerful monsters of their own to even equal the base level of Guyver in power. I say base level because this is anime. Everybody gets upgrades at some point. Anyway, it's a fairly simple narrative that has a really intriguing underlayer of a plot that gives a really interesting spin on the creation of humanity and how it's so easy for the Kronos Corporation to just turn people into fucking monsters without much effort, seemingly anyway, from their scientists. Now, there are 2 Guyver anime, like I mentioned before, and a couple of feature films, and an anime OVA film on top of that. But like I mentioned, we're only going to be going over the series today. Don't make me tap the sign that says disturbing anime, please. The first Guyver anime film came out in the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere around there, and it was called Guyver Out of Control. It sucked. It was really, really bad. It's got some okay animation in it, but there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on in it. Let me just kind of get it through to you. So there is a second Guyver, which, you know, isn't a spoiler. There's actually 3 total. And the second Guyver in this is used by a woman. Now, when Sho puts on the Guyver armor, it doesn't really do anything crazy when it, you know, attaches itself to him. It just kind of does what you would expect it to do if it was like a symbiote from the Marvel Universe or something like that. But with the female character, it fucks her. No, I'm not kidding. And no, we can't show it. Because Jesus fucking Christ, it's like a scene out of a hentai. I can't even show it in the uncensored version. So, yeah, that's fucking stupid. Then there's also a really tone-deaf attempt at having a character theme about, like, fighting spirit and stuff like that, when people are getting butchered left and right by the Guyver like he's just started a new job at a fucking cow slaughtering factory or something. Yeah, it's kind of messed up, and honestly is more hilarious than anything. So I guess if you want a good laugh, there's that. And then finally, there's just a fight scene in it that starts pretty good, but it's a fight scene so nice that they had to do it twice. And I shit you not, they reuse animation cells for half the fucking fight, but with different lighting this time. Yeah, it's really goddamn lazy. Guyver Out of Control is really bad. Don't watch it. Unless you just want to see bad anime, in which case have fun. But as for anime series, we have the 90s series, which was only 12 episodes and only went to a certain point that's still fairly early in the story. And then we have the early to mid 2000s series, which is actually a full season of 26 episodes that actually goes over the first whole major arc of Guyver and does really well with it and set up for what the next major arc was going to be, but sadly it never got a second season. When it comes to the two shows, the comparison points on them are that they both have good animation and they both have really fun soundtracks that are honestly kind of reflective of the time that they were brought out. One thing that's a pleasant surprise with Guyver is that given the time period, and also given that there's quite a few biopunk series out there that can be really trashy, I was genuinely surprised by how fantastic that Guyver is as a series in both of them. Though I can obviously oversimplify Guyver as biopunk tokusatsu, the Guyver as a series is one with a shocking amount of heart to it. On top of being one of the few literary examples that I can think of where expectations get properly subverted in a great way that benefits the story. Ultimately, the way that it stands is if you're looking for a gory romp that admittedly does not have that great of voice acting, but still has pretty good animation and a ridiculous amount of violence in it, honestly, go ahead and check out the original OVA series that was done, and honestly just watch it in Japanese because the voice acting's a lot better there. But then you could follow that up by coming in on around, I want to say, episode actually around 10-ish of the mid-2000s series. You get the same story, and honestly, the English dub is really solid in that one. Oh, geez. It's kind of coming to my attention as I discuss this that we're getting to a point where I'm going to have to go into spoiler territory and bring the act guys in. So, for those of you who have been paying attention for the last 12, 13 or so minutes, this show, at least the two anime shows that Guyver got, I can't help but recommend here. And I don't mean I just recommend, I mean this is a glowing recommendation for me, which is not easy to get, as some of you have probably noticed over the last year. So if you're looking for, like, 90s cornball violence, start off with the 90s anime, and then move over and finish the story of the first arc with the mid-2000s anime. Now, if you don't have the same soft spot for corniness and over-the-top violence that I do, I would just go straight to the 2000s anime, because it's still really violent, don't get me wrong, but the voice acting's a lot better, you get a lot more story with it, and the characterization is just on fucking point. It's great. This, honestly, is one of those shows that, in watching it, I am actually kind of bummed that there isn't a second or third or fourth season to this. Because I really feel like there's a lot of things that I would love to see explored in this that probably just are never going to happen, because sadly the manga has been in hiatus ever since Donald Trump got elected to the presidency, and it doesn't look like the series is ever going to continue, which is really unfortunate, because goddamn, this universe seems fucking cool. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get into the spoiler breakdown, so for those of you who don't want spoilers, feel free to come back, but before you go, a word from our sponsors.
Hello, my name is Michael Octavius. You probably don't know me, but that's about to change. I'm the writer and creator of Human Shield, a character who debuted in Peregrine, Wings of the Falcon. He's not only a member of Star Force, he's the acting team leader who helps Peregrine fight in her first battle. But who exactly is Human Shield? Human Shield is Mateo Alvarez, a man who shouldn't be alive. One day, Buenos Aires, his hometown, suffered one of the largest non-nuclear bombings in history. In that moment, his power activated for the first time, creating a barrier that saved over a third of the city. Since then, he has trained under Silver Falcon and other superheroes to become a great hero in his own right. But now, in the wake of the invasion that killed so many of Earth's heroes, it's time for him to go home and take care of business, as trouble is once again brewing in Buenos Aires. Human Shield is getting ready to launch his first solo adventure with phenomenal art by Mannix and vibrant colors by Farah Normaliza. Don't miss the next book in the Reconstruction story, the first direct sequel to Peregrine, Wings of the Falcon. The Azure Aegis is ready. Are you?
Alright, let's get into spoiler time. So, let's talk about subverting expectations. I feel like the simplest explanation of how to properly subvert expectations in a positive way within literature was, oddly enough, described by fighting game YouTuber, my favorite YouTuber, Maximilian, when he was pointing out why Sindel's friendship on Mortal Kombat 11 sucked.
It subverts your expectations. Well, right. Subverting your expectations is one thing, but subverting your expectations and still have it being satisfying is something completely fucking different. And the whole reason you want to subvert expectations, that the result of the subversion is better than what the original, than something that is expected might be. If you're subverting expectations and it still doesn't land, it's actually fucking worse. It's way worse. It sucks.
The fact of the matter is that oftentimes, whenever people interact with fiction, we tend to look for similar threads to something else that we have seen in the past, because in a lot of ways human beings just look for familiarity because it's comfortable. It's in our nature, essentially. Now, if you can use that against your audience and swerve them into a twist that's more thought-provoking and more exciting than what they originally thought, it can really make for a super enriching experience. So basically the opposite of what Rian Johnson has been doing for the last decade. Now, the first one in Guyver that I mentioned at the start, and I'll go into a little bit more detail, is the fight with the enzyme Zoonoid. In this particular fight, the Guyver gets fucked up beyond all repair. Quite literally, he gets melted, for God's sake, and the control metal is ripped out of his fucking head. Now, this comes out of nowhere because up to this point, the Guyver has beaten everything in front of it. And not only beaten it convincingly. So the fact that they came up with something that could actually kill Guyver, not just beat him, fucking kill him, is fucking nuts right out of the gate. It really is something that you just don't see coming, because up to this point you would think you're going to get the usual tokusatsu flair of, oh no, this person has a dangerous attack, but I'm going to defeat it with the power of friendship and this gun I found, or something like that. But no, that doesn't happen. Our hero gets fucking melted, like he's the Wicked Witch of the West. It's not really something that you expect to happen to the hero of the story. You couldn't do this in Spider-Man, unless it was like an alternate universe or a what-if story. You couldn't do it to Batman unless it was like Elseworlds, if you get my meaning. Now, what really makes this interesting is it actually gives us an excuse to get to the inside of the Kronos Corporation and start to see the inner workings of what is going on. Because up to this point, you have no fucking clue. It was a really unique way to add some intrigue and to move the plot in a direction that ends up being 10 times more revealing than you thought it would be, but in a very good way. Not to mention, I'm a sucker for heroes with healing factors, so the Guyver essentially regenerating from the control metal is something I found to be really fucking cool. It is still very comic bookish in a lot of ways. It's something that you could see maybe Deadpool doing, or in certain Wolverine stories that he could maybe pull off, or something along those lines. But it's played differently. Now, I'm a comic book writer, as you know, you've seen in the advertisements on this channel, so I tend to mark out for things that will remind me of superheroes. And to be honest with you, Guyver is one of those anime that I would recommend to people who are fans of superheroes, because in a lot of ways it carries some of the same beats, just a bit differently. Now, the second big thing that subverts your expectations of what's going on that I found really interesting about the plot was the origins of humanity in this universe. By the way, when I tell you what the origins of humanity are in this, you're going to immediately think that Damon Lindelof ripped off of Guyver for Prometheus. Now, given that Damon Lindelof is a talentless hack, I would absolutely easily be convinced that he ripped off the Guyver. I don't know if he actually did, but I'm going to just think he did because I'm a jerk. By the way, for legal reasons, that's actually a complete and total joke. I don't really think he ripped it off. I just wanted to see if I could make somebody laugh about it. Damon Lindelof does suck, though. So basically, humanity in this universe was created as a template for bioweapons by an alien race called the Creators. Well, that's the name that other people have given the name of this alien race, because they actually don't know what their actual name was. Either way, this ancient race of aliens... Oh god, it's ancient aliens. Fuck me, dude. Fine, throw up a meme real quick. Just get the fucking weird hair guy out of the way. Back on topic! This race of creators made humanity the way that they are so that they could essentially be malleable on a genetic level for combat purposes. It's an interesting explanation as to why it is that the Guyver armor, when attached to a human being, is so goddamn powerful. And why it's so easy to turn the people of Earth into these monsters, these zoonoids, by really anybody that has access to the Creator's technology. It's basically because human beings were built from the ground up to be compatible with this sort of thing. It's almost like we're some sort of genetic tabula rasa for weaponry. It has a bit of a Resident Evil feel to it in some ways, which, given when Guyver came out, and Resident Evil is easily the most popular biopunk franchise on planet Earth, it wouldn't surprise me if there's some inspiration there. Hell, now that I think about it, you could make a really cool Resident Evil style video game in the Guyver universe if you had a normal human being struggling to escape zoonoids and things along those lines and having to find creative ways to kill them. Man, missed opportunities. Anyway, instead of just going with stereotypical ideas, Guyver ends up giving you a world that honestly feels like it's consistently unpredictable. It's not the most complicated universe that I've ever heard of, but it has enough unique ideas to keep things fresh on a regular basis. The other thing that I enjoy about this show is that it's got a really rich cast of characters. The pleasant surprise that I got was that every single character honestly feels very grounded in a lot of ways. Their reactions to the horrible things that go on around them feel organic. All of the bad guys honestly have their own motivations and their own distinctive identities that separate them one from the other. And they feel just as human because they feel a lot of the same emotions that anybody else is going to. They feel loyalty to one another, or they want to stab each other in the back because it's an evil corporation and that's what people do. So they suffer from a lot of the same sins, but also have virtues, which is really weird given the context of some of these characters' situations. But I digress. On top of that compliment that I can give it, the one thing that the author has done a tremendous job of doing is really finding characters on a regular basis that can really be the audience surrogate, but they switch them so that you're not always with the same people and you're getting more unique looks at a situation than just being around Sho all the time. One thing that I especially enjoy is the personality differences between Guyver 1 and Guyver 3. Like I mentioned earlier, there's 3 of these damn things. Guyver 3 is used by Agito Makishima, and he tends to be a much more vengeance-driven character than Sho is. The two characters are consistently aligned with one another throughout the story, but the one thing that I love about them is how different their approaches are to the scenario of being a Guyver. Sho is a bit of a classic superhero type, kind of a Spider-Man sort of guy, but, obviously he kills monsters. Whereas Agito has a methodology that would get a thumbs up from characters like Punisher, Wolverine, or Venom. It's a really cool hero and anti-hero dynamic that gives our group of heroes a good set of tension as they try to work together for a common goal. Now, if you're not a comic book reader like I am, but you're more of a gamer, think about the party in Baldur's Gate 3. How a lot of characters come from very different motivations, but they're brought together for the singular goal of bringing down the absolute. It's a similar scenario to that, basically, where those personality clashes can be just as integral to the story as the overarching plot. Anyway, even though I've gone into some fairly heavy spoilers in this, I actually don't want to go any further than I have, because believe it or not, I've really only given you guys the broad parts of the universe. There's a lot more to this, and I don't want to just give them away. I had a really good experience sitting down and watching the mid-2000s anime of this franchise, and I honestly would rather you guys in the audience at least sit down and watch that show and get a similar experience to what I got. Personally, I love it whenever I watch a show and I just get that sit-down, popcorn-eating experience, but it's considerably deeper than what I was originally expecting. What starts out as this blood-soaked love letter to tokusatsu ends up as this really interesting biopunk story with a ton of heart and some very memorable characters. I definitely think that once I finish reading the manga, I'm gonna do a review of it. But the sad part of it is I don't think, as I mentioned earlier, that this story is ever gonna get finished. It's been on hiatus since 2016. There's been no sign of any new anything from this franchise. But you never know what's gonna happen. A lot of people didn't think Berserk was going to keep going after Kentaro Miura passed away, but it is. I mean, when it comes to that, I was stuck on a boat with a big guy with a big sword for 10 years. And then there was more story. So crazier things have happened. Anyway, if you enjoyed this particular video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with your friends as well if they haven't seen Guyver and you're wanting to get them into it. If you'd like to become a patron, options for that are down in the description alongside the comic books that my publishing company is currently offering. With all that said, my name is Micah Curtis, your favorite vanilla gorilla, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.